Hey and welcome to my channel. Today we're gonna look at a great game played by Jan-Krzysztof Duda against reigning world chess champion Gukesh D. The game was played just a few days ago in the latest Grand Chess Tour event, the Rapid and Blitz in Croatia. The game started off with e4, e5 and d4. Right from the start, Duda plays very confrontational chess. The pawn was taken and Duda takes back with the queen. This is the so-called center game. It's a very rare opening, and even in this position, the more popular move usually is pawn to c3, which is the so-called Danish gambit. Here the game could develop something like pawn takes, bishop to c4, pawn takes b2 and bishop takes. This is also a very fun and aggressive opening, but objectively it's not all that great. But back to the game. Gukesh here played knight to c6, by far the most popular move, and it makes sense. By moving out his queen so early on, Duda violated one of the basic principles of the opening, which says that you shouldn't bring out your queen too early in the game, because then it may get attacked very quickly and it will cost a lot of time to retreat it. In the center game, however, the white player usually argues that after the queen retreats to e3, at some point the queen's placement is going to be useful because it can very quickly help with an attack on the king side. Another point is that if black would here now get too aggressive and only focuses on attacking the queen with something like b6 and bishop to c5, then this can actually go very wrong for black very quickly. Like here, after queen g3, attacking the pawn, most popular move is queen to f6, defending it, but now after knight to d5, white is now actually winning already because black cannot defend the c7 pawn and the queen at the same time. So as you can see, there are a lot of tricks in this opening, and that's why in faster time controls like Rapid or Blitz, it is actually a very dangerous weapon. The game here still followed the most popular path with knight to f6 and knight to c3. The basic plan of this opening for white is very easy. It doesn't actually really matter what black does, what setup they're gonna choose. White usually always plays the bishop to d2, castles long, gets the queen to the king side, and then starts a big attack with pushing the pawns over here as well. And actually, we're gonna see exactly that in the game later on. So Gukesh played the most popular and also the strongest move, bishop to b4, pinning the knight. White will just follow the exact plan that I just highlighted, bishop to d2 and long castles. Here black plays rook to e8, because this pawn on e4 is pretty much the only vulnerability that white has in the position. Here, the old main line and still the most popular move is queen to g3. Just like I said earlier, bring the queen over to the king side to help with a big attack in the future. Here, white doesn't care at all about the pawn and just sacrifices it. One player that has played this a lot in the past is Nepomniachtchi. But objectively, this really isn't so great. And recently, the trend has been going towards a new move. The move that also Duda chose in this game. Queen to f4. So what is the point behind this move? The queen is still going towards the king side. Oftentimes it will actually also still go to g3 and attack from there. But the other point is that it still temporarily defends the e4 pawn. He first has to take the knight and only then can win the pawn on e4. And the difference is that now this bishop is super strong on the diagonal also against the king, and white will get an even stronger attack. Let me show you a few sample lines. Now the most popular move here on club level is that the knight takes on e4, which is already a mistake, because now it will get super dangerous for black after bishop to c4. All of white's pieces are extremely active and it will be super hard for black to even defend. The most common line here goes knight takes c3, bishop takes on f7, picking up the rook, and afterwards taking the knight. Now, white is just up material and will likely win the game. That's why in this position, if black wants to get anything out of the opening, he has to take with the rook. The queen has to retreat, and now the best line goes d5, f3, rook to d6, and after knight to e2, the rook goes back to d6. This is the best setup black can play here, because it's just very solid. And the engine agrees that black has a very slight advantage here. But nevertheless, white is still gonna have a good attack. The pawn storm is still coming, white's pieces are still super active, and again, for time control like Rapid or Blitz, it is a practically very dangerous opening choice for black still. But after queen f4, none of this actually happened in the game. Gukesh either didn't know about this line, which I can't really imagine, he's the world champion after all, or he simply found it too risky. He chose to play the more calm move, pawn to d6. And this might look more solid, but actually white is still gonna have a lot of fun with the exact same type of attack that I showed earlier. The pawns are gonna push and black's king is gonna be in a lot of danger. Duda chose to play pawn to f3, defending the pawn. Now it's really not gonna get lost. And white is just gonna have an attack without being down a pawn. Gukesh developed the bishop and here comes the attack. g4, knight e5, h4. The knight will soon be attacked anyways, so Gukesh chose to retreat it right now. White doesn't care about any of this, pushes the pawn. Knight b6, pushes the pawn. Okay, we are already in the middle of White's attack. Gukesh really needs some attack for himself and plays knight to c4. The bishop takes, the knight takes back, and now the last piece of White is developed with knight to e2. Gukesh plays c6, probably to get the queen out at some point, and also at the same time avoiding knight jumps like knight to d5. Duda tries to break open the king with pawn to h6. Of course, Gukesh cannot open the king like with pawn takes h6, because after the rook would take, it would be a complete disaster for him. So he tries to keep the position closed with pawn to g6. But this of course weakens all of these dark squares, which will play a big role in the rest of the game. Duda plays pawn to a3, and here actually Gukesh takes the pawn. Now a quick exercise for you, stop the video right here and calculate whether or not White can take that knight. If you did that, then you will probably very quickly have realized that White can absolutely not take that knight, because after the bishop takes, it's going to be check, the king has to move, and after the queen gives a check, it's going to be checkmate very soon. But then, what does White do here? The first step to finding that out is actually realizing that Black isn't really doing much. Yes, he just took that pawn, and it was a pawn in front of the king. But there's nothing much going on. All of the heavy pieces are still in the back rank and far from being in the attack. And only the knight and bishops, they aren't really doing much. So instead of now panicking and trying to make defensive moves, White can just continue with their attacking plans. Okay, but what are those? Now just before, White has weakened these dark squares and would love to attack on them. But in order to do that, White should get rid of the most important defender of those squares, which is the dark squared bishop. How does White achieve that? By moving this knight away and then trading those bishops off. Duda does that by knight to a4. Now the bishops are looking at each other and Black doesn't really have a choice but trading it. White takes back with the queen and now has a straightforward plan of going to either d4 or c3, anywhere on this diagonal, and then checkmating Black on g7. Black for now covers these squares with knight to b5. And Duda plays a clever move, rook to g1. So the queen still wants to go here at some point. And in order to do that, this pawn has to be defended, because otherwise it could be taken away by the queen with a check. Now Gukesh tries to free himself a little bit by playing pawn to f6. Of course, Duda doesn't want to take, because after the queen takes, there would be not much of an attack left. The queen is a very strong defender and it would be much more difficult to get anything. So he rather supports the pawn by playing pawn to f4. And Gukesh plays pawn to f5. Now the plan for White really doesn't change. These squares are weak and he wants to go there with the queen. This knight is stopping that, so White needs to get rid of it. Duda plays knight to d4, attacking the knight, forcing it to retreat or trade itself. Gukesh trades the pawns, Duda trades the knights, and afterwards brings the other knight back. Gukesh plays pawn to d5. Now this is a very important moment, because there is a move for White that pretty much would break Black's position immediately. Duda played a very strong move here, which was queen to d4, and it's pretty much exactly what he wanted to play the whole time. But in this position there is something even stronger. If you want to find it yourself, pause the video right here and try it. Alright, the move that Duda missed here was pawn to f5. This is a pawn sacrifice and can be taken by both the bishop and the pawn, but it turns out both are very bad. First, we can look at the bishop. If the bishop takes, this pawn is losing the defense, and if the knight takes, it will very soon jump to f6 and the attack will be completely overwhelming. Now, if the pawn takes, then the queen can again go to d4, threaten the checkmate, and after Black defends with, for example, queen to d7, then White will break with pawn to g6. And there's absolutely nothing Black can do against this attack. Now, Duda's move, queen to d4, still was very strong, but it gave Gukesh a chance to at least survive for a bit longer. He played queen to c7, defending against the g7 mating threat, and now Duda played pawn to f5. This looks very similar, but here, after the bishop takes and the knight takes on d5, Black has the extra move queen to e5. Now this is blocking the queen from getting the access to g7, so there's at least no mate anymore. Now White can still win material with this fork, but he's gonna have to trade the queens for it, and that's what happened in the game. King f7, knight takes the rook, queen takes on d4, and the knight gave one intermediate check on d6, and now after the queen took and the rook captured back, White is up in exchange, so he has a rook for a bishop, but Black also still has a couple of pawns, and this endgame is at least still complicated enough so that Gukesh can play on for a bit more. Still, Duda gave Gukesh no chance anymore and he won it very solidly. He traded the rooks, broke into the position with the other rook, and then king and rook together managed to hold off any of black's advances, and in the very end there was only one pawn left for Duda, but that was enough to win the game. Here the king is a very strong defender and the rook simply is stronger than the bishop, so that the white pawn could just advance more and more, and at some point Gukesh had to resign. I went through this endgame very quick now because I think the main and interesting part of this game was really the middle game, where we were able to see how strong this opening was and kind of how easy it was for Duda to get this big attack. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did, I would be very grateful for a like. And if you don't want to miss further game commentaries like these, maybe consider to subscribe. Thank you very much.